Hi, and thank you for joining us for this amazing webinar with our partners Wi-Fi Joe, ATX, and Birddog. What this team is going to talk to you about today is just fascinating. One of the most complex workflows I've ever seen in my life. I worked in the past in production, so I was involved hands-on in setting up workflows and cameras, and I've never seen something that complex, but at the same time, the team did it in a so smooth, easy way. Simply plug and play. You're gonna hear more about that workflow, how they did it, what's the lesson learned, and what's the benefit of moving to IP. What this team did, if I can look 10 years ago, it could have costed times 10. It could have took 10 more people to do it or 50 more people to do it, and endless of planning hours. With NDI, it was simple, easy, cost-effective, and most probably the event was awesome. So enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Hello everyone, I'm joined today by Joe Viata, founder of Wi-Fi Joe, and Anthony McQueen, project manager at ATX Event Systems. Hello gentlemen, how are you today?
Hello, we're doing okay. How about you, Renato?
Doing great, doing great.
Well, thank you very much. So we're here to talk about the Consensus event that happened last year in Austin, Texas. Can you tell me about the challenges you were facing?
So ATX Event Systems and Wi-Fi Joe Inc. were tasked with helping produce Consensus 2022. Now, Consensus is the world's largest cryptocurrency conference that was held last year in downtown Austin, Texas. It's across multiple venues, and it's just a massive, massive festival with people flying in from all over the world, various keynote speakers, presentations, artistic installs, all kinds of different things, making it, I mean, honestly, it's a full festival across downtown Austin. Imagine like a South by Southwest for cryptocurrency. Right. So one of the big goals with the client was to have a central command station, like a command center that would be able to see all of the cameras that we had in all the separate spaces and control them as well. We had 7 venues and over 30 of Birddog's PTZ cameras in these venues. All these cameras were linked on the same VLAN, the same actual network, allowing us to use Birddog Cloud to see every camera, to control every camera. And that kind of central communication was one of the biggest obstacles that we had, but was a fun challenge to overcome.
And Joe?
Yeah, so I guess part of the challenges that we had, I guess that we discovered in the pre-planning phases was, infrastructure was going to be the #1 challenge. And those challenges that we had were, some of them were really awesome, where we had fiber solutions. Other places just didn't have it. So, our goal was, like Anthony said, was to carry one VLAN across the entire city from the Austin Convention Center rooftop. At the rooftop, in June is about 120 degrees in Texas. So, I mean, we had a lot of physical challenges that we had to overcome and also, get permission from all of these places. We had about 3.5 weeks to plan, design, and implement a 10 gig network across the city.
Yeah, Anthony, you said you used Birddog for most of the production. Why did you go with Birddog?
Yeah, lots of reasons. Birddog's P400s, we used their 4K variant for this entire event. Big thing is that just their functionality. They perform well in low light. They have a very small form factor, and they have PoE. And so a single network cable was able to give us power, video signal, and full PTZ control. With something at this scale, and you're trying to execute it very quickly, we're going to take something that's going to make the execution simple, right? So that was huge, but as well as their form factor. I mean, they're so small, you could put them anywhere. And they're so friendly to be able to be clamped to a piece of truss, or we even had one on an overhead rafter in a venue, because some of these venues, it's pretty cozy in there. There was not much real estate at all for other production gear beyond just the standard front of house setup.
And Joe, question for you. How did NDI help you with the event?
Well, we used NDI because it's part of the TCP/IP protocol stack. I mean, we just integrated it into our intranet, and by doing that, we were able to carry one VLAN across the network. And what we ended up using was, a lot of different mixed technologies from fiber to point, to deliver it. And, this is, understanding how it works and why it works and where it lives on the OSI model really is, why I was really successful on how to get it from point A to point B. Because there were some venues that were a mile away physically from the command center to the venue. And how did we deliver it? Well, we used point-to-point technology to basically beam internet into the building, and it's pretty amazing what we ended up delivering, because we were delivering really high capacity bandwidth in a place that just doesn't have that much infrastructure.
Great. You mentioned physical challenges. What other types of things did you have to compromise on, and what were the expectations from your client?
Well, I can tell you, being on top of rooftops in July and June in Austin was pretty challenging, just because of the elements, right? The environment that we were in. We were on top of rooftops, which in June is about 120 degrees in Austin. So that was one of the definitely physical challenges we had.
Great. And would you like to add anything to that, Anthony?
Sure, yeah. We had a pretty condensed timeline to get this event executed. I mean, within the span of weeks, the entire pre-production process had to be done. And that's venue advance work, that's staffing, that's sourcing equipment, that's doing the network calculations, everything. And so with that, we were working tirelessly to make the event successful, but also look at other backup solutions. And so Joe was not only providing the backbone for our NDI network for the Birddogs and Birddog Cloud, he was also doing attendee Wi-Fi. He was also doing production Wi-Fi. And so whenever we were doing our point-to-points, we allocated extra bandwidth in those calculations in the event of a failure. We had that extra bandwidth to put elsewhere if something were to fail. So with a tight timeline like that, we did the best that we could to absolutely give us multiple backup solutions.
Okay, a question for you both. We've heard a lot about what NDI is doing right for Pro AV, but what could we do to improve to help you out?
I think the big thing to drive home here is that to have NDI be successful, you need a strong, reliable network, 100%. Just like you would need, reliable DMX connections for a lighting rig, you need a reliable network to have NDI work. That's going to be an ongoing obstacle for production houses to continue implementing, and that they need to become network professionals. That they need to understand bandwidth calculations to make sure it is a sound connection. So NDI is a great tool when you have the right backbone to implement it.
Yeah, I want to say some of the challenges that we're going to face is a couple of them. Getting equipment. Knowing when you need to go from 1 gig to 10 gig. Getting these components. Budgeting for this. Right now the supply chain is so hard to even get any equipment nowadays. That's just one challenge I face all the time is, just getting equipment. If I order it now, I might get it in 9 months from now, and also the budget restraints of, 10 gig. 10 gig is way more expensive than 1 gig. It's not a consumer level kind of device yet out there that can run anything that's 10 gig capable. You have to go to a professional or a custom team that has those capabilities already built and knows how to implement them.
So you've both been giving us fantastic answers about NDI. I just keep getting distracted by what's over your right hand shoulder, Anthony. Can you run us through your to-do list, please?
Oh, yeah, I'm a very, very busy man, as you can see. I have 3 things I need to accomplish today. Tell Iman Drew that he rocks. We need to buy 47 of the NDI Studio 4Ks. And if I have time this afternoon, try to run for president. We'll see where that goes.
You got my vote.
Well,
Thank you.
You got mine too. Thank you. Excellent. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Now, be sure to stick around because in just a moment, we're going to be taking all of your questions. So please be sure to type them into the chat. See you in a minute. Hello everyone, it's Renato here. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Dan Mile, CEO and founder of Birddog. Hi Dan, how's it going?
Good, Renato. How are you? I'm so glad to be here.
It's great to have you back on the show, and thank you so much for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about Birddog today, and can you just give us some of the latest news and updates?
Absolutely. We've always got news here at Birddog, and it's always absolutely about NDI and how we can enable new workflows and new features. Really recently, we had some really great examples of that with the ISE show in Barcelona. We announced our new video wall product, which I think we'll talk about a bit later. We've also got a range of new cameras that have just come out. And also our pod device, which is a really great device that allows you to take NDI and convert that into a web camera for meeting rooms and communications. I think what's exciting for me with our products in general and just overall with NDI is how far and wide we can take the products. We can use it in a broadcast environment, but then use those same devices in unified communications and AV as well.
Great. Okay, first of all, let's just talk about how you've been using NDI 5.5 in all your latest products.
Absolutely, and I find it actually quite amazing that we're up to NDI 5.5, right? Because we've been with NDI since the very start, since actually before version 1. As we've moved along through those versions, there's just been so many new features, and I think NDI 5.5 really is my favourite release. Obviously, it's the latest one, so it's got the most amount of features, but it's really unlocked some great capabilities. Within all of our products, we're actually in the process of updating them to NDI 5.5. So, for example, our entire camera range is now in NDI 5.5. And I think the good thing with that, there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. The first one is the fact that you can update to newer versions with existing hardware. If you bought a camera from Birddog 3 years ago, you get a free upgrade to version 5.5. It gives you more reliable streaming to be able to send video over a network, maybe on some more compromised types of networks. So it is much more flexible. It also adds some great features which we're using, which I think are quite unique, like the NDI Genlock and NDI Failover, which allows you to synchronize your cameras more tightly. And if, for example, you have a remote source and something goes away because there's no network connection or someone hangs up, it will automatically change over to an existing source. So things like that really tie together the benefits of these IP-based workflows and really shows how NDI can work together.
I know you're keen to talk about some of your new products today. Can you talk about the pod, for example?
I can, absolutely. So I love all our new products. I actually love all of our products, but I think Pod is one of my favorite ones. I'm actually just going to switch here so you can see my top camera, and I'm just pointing at it, and you can see here, I think, if I've switched it correctly, let's try again, there we go. This is Pod here, so it's a tiny little device, and you can see here it's got a couple of buttons on the top. And what that is effectively it's going to take your NDI source, whatever it is on your network, and it can connect to multiple NDI sources. And instead of receiving it like you would normally on, say, an NDI receiver and putting it onto an HDMI screen, it'll receive it and convert it into a web camera. And firstly, you might sort of look at that and go, well, there's NDI tools. NDI 5.5 has a web camera interface. But where this is really exciting is in the AV and unified communication space. If you can imagine having one of those pod devices sitting on a meeting room desk, and you can plug in any laptop and instantly get access to any NDI camera or any NDI source. And those buttons on top are there to switch between those sources. So you might have, for example, a converter that's taking a computer output. You might have your output from your TriCaster and your camera, and you can easily switch between those and work directly into a Teams or a Zoom type call.
Very cool. As always, great design as well. I love all your product design. I know you also were keen to talk about Play and how NDI decoders scaled it up enormously. Can you talk about that for us, please?
Absolutely. I'm just going to switch my camera again so you can see this. So I had my pod device here, which is the little guy that takes the output and makes it available as a web camera. This guy right next to it, which is our Birddog Play. We've been shipping this now for a couple of months, and it's rocketed to be the most popular product we've ever made. I know partially to do with the cost of it. It's retail in US dollars is $149. And that really allows NDI to just scale up enormously. We can take any NDI source, whether it's a Birddog camera or one of our Birddog devices, or a TriCaster or any other camera, and we can decode that. It's designed really to be mounted on the back of a screen, or put somewhere in a building where you want to actually look at that NDI monitoring. It'll take any type of NDI, so it'll take your high bandwidth or full NDI and decode that back out to HDMI. It'll also take NDI HX2 and HX3 and decode that out. One of the coolest features, I think, with this is it's almost like a set-top box for NDI. It's got this thing called CEC, which is a control protocol where you can use your TV remote control to bring up an on-screen menu and just choose a different source. So we found this going into so many different places where previously, because of just scaling up and the costs of things, maybe it wasn't appropriate. But now that you can have such a cost-effective device to be able to receive NDI anywhere on your network, it just enables so many new workflows, and we found it being really popular.
Great. Another really cool product I saw at ISE in Barcelona last week was the NDI video wall. Can you talk to us about that, please?
Love to. So NDI Video Wall is actually a project we've been working on for quite some time. And coming back to that NDI 5.5, it really has been that game changer for it. Because NDI 5.5 has this NDI Genlock feature, we're able to tie up all of our receivers to be much closer in terms of timing, which is really important for video walls. But in essence, what NDI Video Wall is it's an NDI piece of software that will receive any type of NDI stream you have on your network, right up to 4K 60. And then you can choose to cut that into different outputs. So it can be either arranged in a 2x2 or a 3x3 output. So when you then put it into a play, for example, or receive it on a play, you can design a video wall with that. It just changes the dynamics of a video wall in many different ways. Firstly, it's a real-time device, which means that it's very low latency. You can use it in a studio, for example, as a background or an IMAG screen. But it's also really flexible because you can take NDI outputs from anything and switch instantly. So it becomes this destination that's not just a single screen or not just a single device. It makes it into a whole big wall, and I think it really has a great amount of impact. The feedback we got at ISE was overwhelming for Video Wall, and I think the way that it ties in directly with our Birddog Play devices really makes a great solution, which is super cost effective.
So,
Yep.
Dan, I hear there's an update to Silicon 2. Can you shed some light on that for us, please?
Absolutely. So with Birddog products, we always talk about it's our silicon that does the processing. So inside every Birddog product, whether it's a camera or whether it's a converter, it has our silicon chip inside. And we've got this new update, which is called Silicon 2. It's a second generation of how we process video. The cool thing is every single camera, every single device that we've made is able to be updated to this Silicon 2. And we're starting that with our cameras. What it allows us to do is reflash onto the device, onto the camera, its firmware, and allow it to do more than just our NDI. So Birddog's signature implementation of NDI is the high bandwidth or full NDI at the lowest latency possible, so you can use it in traditional kind of broadcast environments with no compromise compared to SDI, for example. With Silicon 2, we've then added in the NDI HX2 and HX3 protocols, which allow us to not only send out the video over the network as high bandwidth NDI or full NDI, but at the same time we can send out NDI HX. And for me, this creates some really interesting workflows where, for example, you might have a studio environment where you do want to keep that latency as low as possible and make sure the quality is absolutely as high as you can. But you might have another building in a separate campus, for example, where you have a network connection, but you might not want to send high bandwidth NDI. The fact that all of our cameras can now send out both at the same time just creates some really nice ways to get video around any kind of campus or any building or any network. And I think what we're trying to do here is give people so much choice in terms of how they do their production. You can use the high bandwidth but for some locations, and then you can switch it over to being a high efficiency for other locations. It even supports other formats like SRT and RTMP, for example, as well. So I think it's really exciting. Two things with that really are probably exciting for me. The formats that it supports, but the fact that it's also working on all of our existing cameras. If you bought a camera from Birddog 3 years ago, you get this upgrade for free, and it adds so many more different formats to the camera. And I think that really highlights the flexibility of NDI, the fact that we can keep adding features, and it's something we're really proud of and will continue to do. And this is a really exciting time in terms of adding this Silicon 2 feature.
Great. It's also good to hear that it's also a sustainable thing if you're reusing old products and updating them, and that's good to hear from a environmental point of view, of course.
Absolutely. We love that kind of side of things as well. We're certainly not a company that wants to release the 2023 model camera and then 2024 model camera. We'd rather have a camera that people use and get more and more out of it and find that they need to have more of those cameras. That's kind of our business model, rather than trying to retire old ones and get people forced into buying new ones. So sustainability is really important. We're looking at all sorts of things with that, including the plastics that we use within our moldings to make them more efficient, many different ways that we're approaching it to make sure that our devices are as efficient as possible.
Obviously, we're here for the webinar, and we're going to be talking about a Birddog user story, which was very successful. It was the ATX event systems at Consensus 2022 in Texas, Austin, Texas. Can you tell us about that production and how NDI helped you solve all the logistics?
Absolutely. I think it's one of my favorite use cases overall that we've done. Just the scale of it, the flexibility that the customer was able to achieve, and the way it was all kind of put together in really record time. All of those things really point to how NDI is so valuable. Firstly, the fact that NDI is natively on networks just lends itself so much more for remote type productions. If you're trying to use a SDI camera, you need to take encoders and you need to convert and try and work out how you can use control protocols and all sorts of other stuff. The fact that NDI is just on your network means that effectively straight away you're at a much faster starting point. So with ATX, one of the cool things they had was the speed that they were able to set up this event and the connectivity. They had multiple sites around the city. I think it was 7 different sites with over 30 cameras. They were using our Birddog P400 cameras, which is our really high quality 4K camera. What they were able to do though is in those 7 different locations is take the NDI and with the help of our Birddog cloud be able to send that NDI teleported across to every other location. And it meant that they were able to have these really engaging and interconnected events that were all across the whole city. It's something, again, that's it's kind of really game-changing, and it was able to create a whole bunch of interactivity within the event that kind of seemed seamless to everybody that was using it. And the fact that this could be rolled out so quickly and so effortlessly is just testament to how NDI works. The fact that as soon as you plug in a camera, it's available on the network. You'll talk to Wi-Fi Joe and how they set up that network, but as soon as you have a network available, NDI just plays so well with that. And I think for me, the scale of this particular project and really the successful pulling off of it in such a short time really shows how cool our cameras and then the NDI products really are as well.
It's a great case study, and I'm looking forward to talking to the guys later about how they set everything up. Dan, I think that's everything for the moment. We're going to join you again later on for our webinar, but until then, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Renato. Always happy to talk.
Great. Thank you. For the question and answer section of the webinar. Hello, my name is Renato and I'll be moderating this session. I'd like to firstly apologise for the technical difficulties that we've been having during the production. I hope it hasn't ruined the experience too much. I'm joined today by Anthony McCoy, Project Manager at ATX Systems, and Joe Virata, founder of Wi-Fi Joe, who oversaw running the event. Dan Miles, CEO of Birddog, who also supplied the amazing P4K PTZs and, of course, the Birddog Cloud to support the production. And last but not least, Roberto Musso, Technical Project Products Marketing Director with NDI. Hi. This is your chance to ask any questions to our panel. So please type them into the chat and we'll do our very best to answer as many as we can. With questions rolling. Is a question for Anthony and Joe. After such a successful production, what could be improved upon?
I think having more time would be great. In our industry, we're one of my coworkers and I jokingly say that we are owed having jerseys that say the Houdinis on the back because we make magic happen. With a longer timeline, we'd be able to execute just things, I think, more efficiently and at larger scale. Because once we got the infrastructure in place for Consensus, it had me thinking, how could we go ahead and make this be at other venues? Or how could we tie this out to use NDI Bridge in some ways so I can see this in my condo at home, and just different ways that I wanted to keep messing with it and kind of get into the circus of NDI. But yeah, I would say timeline, what would be helpful, and budget. That's always going to be a thing that we're dealing with, right? That's what industry is, trying to deliver a quality product within the budgetary parameters that we have.
I'm curious to know, what format were you using during the production? Was it full bandwidth NDI or HX3?
No, it was just full-fledged NDI. Yeah, we did not compress it.
Roberto,
Joe,
I have a question for you.
What you're seeing too?
Perhaps you could briefly explain the difference between the different formats for me.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time here.
Yeah, we're here to.
That was a question for Roberto. Perhaps you could briefly explain the difference and the advantages between the different formats for us.
Yeah, sure. So NDI, we have a different format, NDI high bandwidth and NDI ATX. NDI high bandwidth is based on our own codec, and with NDI HX3 we support different codec like H.264 or HAVC. With all the NDI format, we support metadata, multi-audio channel, and alpha channel, for example. Metadata are very important. And something new is HX3. HX3 is very important because with HX3, we define a new standard. And the focus is to have a very low latency and very high quality with HAVC or H.264 compression. And what is very important with HX3 is the certification process. So all the camera manufacturer need to send us a unit, and we certify the unit. And this is a big step forward for NDI, because we want to make sure that the quality of the product and the user experience is great. And this is probably the main reason why we define HX3.
Great, thank you very much for that. Anthony, a question for you. Now that this event has been successful, are you planning to do more remote or hybrid events like this?
Absolutely. I think one of the gifts from the pandemic, although it was a very, very stressful time for our industry and we had to innovate, but a gift from that time was that it really propelled us forward and learning how to deal with virtual productions. How can we make this happen? How can we pivot and stay relevant in a world where we cannot be in person? But now that we're kind of on the other side of the pandemic, I'm really excited to see how can we make the world still feel very small in a positive way, right? Because right now on this call, we have Dan in London, we have Roberto over in Italy. How can we make that be just the norm now going forward, outside of adjusting sleep schedules? How can we make that be the norm to for any live event? And so right now we use that a lot for anything from music festivals. We've had some really bright minds and engineers in the past with our company use NDI from anything from live virtual events to music festivals to even remotely controlling machines across, a outdoor field. And so it's just the NDI tool set I definitely see being part of our go-to toolbox for production.
How are the current innovations in connectivity opening up new avenues for your business?
Great question. See, for me, it's, the virtual world is really, it's still here. Corporate companies still need to get their message out to their employees. That's one of the biggest things that I see, what we're doing and what we've been having, to problem solve is trying to, figure out solutions to make things a bit more efficient, broadcast our message, and being able to, bring the community closer together, sure. And I think for me, that benefits me and my company because I'm the network guy. I bring the network and bring everybody together. So that definitely benefits me for sure.
That's great to hear. Great. Dan, I have a question for you. What lies on the horizon for companies like yours when you think about the potential of NDI's connectivity?
That's a great question. I think in terms of connectivity and where the future is going, like I said before, the fact that we're on a network is just a starting point. Now that we're on a network, we can be connected anywhere globally. And I think at the moment what we've got is some great connectivity that can go between one point and another and kind of and create shows like we've just been talking about. But adding more deep layers of control and interconnectivity are really where I think that's going to head. So I think more and more integration across whole platforms is where NDI is going to help, and that overall communication.
Great. And while I have, does Bird plan to release an update for the 4K quad converter to add support for all features such as HDMI input and output?
So yeah, the 4K quad is one of our products, which I'm actually really proud of in terms of the architecture of it. It's the only device out there in any kind of IP-based encoding that is so small that can do 4 channels of 4K 60. it's got an extensive feature set, and there's some things in there that we're still working on bringing out. The core functionality, though, is the NDI encoding or decoding at 4 channels of up to 4K. When you look at some of the other features, it does have an HDMI output, and that is absolutely being turned on in terms of the ability to work with. That's something that's on the website saying it's coming soon, and it's coming soon. It doesn't have an HDMI input, so unfortunately I can't say we're going to do that. But the 4K quad really is a pretty special device in the form factor that it's about the same size as an iPhone that can do 4 channels of 4K 60, either encode or decode with full NDI.
Wow. Okay, impressive stuff. Joe, another question for you. Someone's asking, do you use full NDI or NDI ATX? I have trouble with point-to-point connections having too much latency and dropping too many frames to be usable. Do you have any recommendations on this? On my end, we end up setting up SRT, but we'd love to be able to use NDI. Anything to say to that?
Yeah, using the first thing that what we have to do is, stabilize the network and stabilize the backbone. And it's really what my role was, is basically making sure that we have a stable infrastructure, and then that way we can build on that foundation, of that. And honestly, that's what my expertise is. I'm Wi-Fi Joe because I build point-to-point. I build point-to-point links for customers that can be 16 miles in the middle of a desert, or it can be on a high-rise Austin building shooting down into a parking lot. It all comes down to the infrastructure, and sometimes you have to really look at what your capabilities are. There's some point-to-points out there that we had that were 60 gig radio links that were registered with the SEC. I mean, these are not something that you can just go buy off the shelf. You have to get you have to really know and understand like the federal guidelines of radio technology, because it changes in almost every single country that you're in, and you have to stay within those lanes and stay within those frequencies really to be successful. And part of what my job role was making sure that we had that foundation there to set up, not just the NDI, carry the NDI protocol, but also to carry other, elements that we needed to do. We had registration servers that were connected also there. We had, I think, an NFT gallery that was needed to be an atomic clock, and that is all based on the network, and that's some of the stuff that that I deal with I deal with the nitty gritty, basics of that stuff. And that's what really made this whole part successful.
Great, thank you so much for that, Joe. For Roberto, can an NDI network be established directly from one 4G, 5G LTE site to another 4G, 5G LTE site?
Probably not today, because the network jittering, and by the way, what Joe explained is very important. I mean, what we have done with NDI to make everything simple, but then you need to have a good network knowledge to make it working fine. And so 4G and 5G today is not designed to support the kind of latency we have in NDI, but let's see in the future.
Great, thank you very much. I have a question for you, Roberto, or Anthony to answer as well. What audio encoding schemas do you encounter? Was it necessary to convert audio to NDI to ensure audio sync? Do you all have to interface with Dante audio at all?
You can go first, Roberto. I have thoughts on that, but
so
okay,
in your, I don't know the use case, but usually, so I can see many use cases where customer use Dante and NDI in the same network or in separate network, but the workflow is the combination between NDI and Dante. This is something that happens daily. And then, I mean, it's quite easy to resynchronize audio and video, even if you use Dante and NDI. There are tools that allow user to re-embed Dante audio into an NDI stream and adjust the latency. But once again, I think is very important, the network infrastructure, because this is making the difference.
Agreed. And I'll say for us, yes, it depends on what kind of event we have and what kind of timeline we have. We've used audio over NDI many, many times, and that's worked out just fine. But oftentimes here on campus in our studio, we'll have different networks going at once, where we have our NDI network, we have our Dante network going on, and that's where we literally have Wi-Fi Joe walk in the space and say, hey, do we have enough headroom here? Because like that is everything. And I think that's one of the biggest points I was trying to drive home, and everybody else is here too. It seems like that NDI is a very, very convenient protocol. It really can be plug and play. But on the pre-production side, early on, you have to have that planning. You have to have somebody that is a network engineer. And for me, it's a bit exciting because it's like this whole other slice of the pizza pie opened up in our industry, to where it's like, yes, it's still lighting, audio, video, broadcast, but now networking. And that's talking to everything. So that's super exciting to see what that will look like in the coming years.
Right, Joe, talking about networks, someone's asked me, what network infrastructure do you use?
I'm usually a Cisco house, so we use a lot of Cisco technology for what we have. For this instance, we used quite a bit of mix of technology. We used, from the radios, from being mimosas, to a couple places where we had some ubiquity access points. It really was a mix of technology, from Cisco, ubiquity to just to make it really all work, because there's all so many different elements that we're trying to accomplish, especially for the Wi-Fi industry. We typically lean on a certain product. If we're looking for switches, Cisco is the backbone of most of that technology. For radios, you have Motorola that you can use. You have Ubiquiti also has a product line that's really affordable. And that's where, that's kind of the stuff that we used. I mean, we used a mix of everything to really make this work.
Great, thank you so much for that. Anthony, I have a question for you. What do you think events like Consensus will require in the future that the current technology of connectivity or connectivity technology is still not able to deliver?
I think, in my opinion, it's exactly what Roberto mentioned, or one of the questions that was here previously. It's with NDI being so flexible and so plug and play, what is the least amount of infrastructure you need to have a video event happen, right? I mean, right now, it can really just be a couple of texts with a laptop, some Birddog controllers, and just a couple hours of setup. And with the right network, they're good to go. It truly is plug and play. But for me, it's thinking, well, what if we had off-site? What if we had mobile stations, or we had people walking the streets of downtown Austin, wherever the event may be held, just being that kind of mobile element, but still being tied into Birddog Cloud, still being tied into the NDI network reliably. And that kind of stuff you can do, but like Roberto just mentioned, it's still in its early phases, and we're looking forward to seeing that being very stable in the future, so we can do that. Because a reality where you could use a mobile hotspot, and that is going to lock in your video and your audio. At that point, you're a mobile production house. You're a broadcast studio. Like, where do you want to go? That's very cool.
Very cool. I have a question here for Joe. What redundancies do you build into the network to ensure no dropout? What was the bandwidth of the backbone? 10G or 40G?
No, we had a 10 gig intranet, basically, that we built, and then we had 2 gig links, 2 copper links from the ACC. Basically, what we were using. So we had redundancy from going from one ISP, and then it failed over to another. But we never really used the second WAN connection. But we need to build that into our topology, because we did run into situations where one of the venues, actually multiple of the venues, had a carrier that went offline during the event. And when that went offline, we lost registration, and we lost attendee Wi-Fi. Well, because we built in redundancies, we were able to switch the route and go to another WAN connection, and then basically changed the VLAN, went straight out to the ACC instead. And we were able to make those changes within, minutes versus going backwards and trying to infrastructure and trying to take a reactive approach. I always think of taking a proactive approach and build all of these redundancies, into your firewall, into your switches, build them into your, even when you're on site with power. That's one thing people really don't talk about. Power is really, really important. Some of it can be clean and some of it can be coming from generators that can be really dirty. That's not all the same.
Great, thank you. A couple of final questions here to wrap up. Roberto, could NDI be able to hold up a theatre production with, let's say, a live camera going via NDI into the server and then being able to be projected or inserted?
If I understood well the question, I think it's possible. Probably NDI and depend of the complexity of the workflow, because every piece of application or equipment is adding latency. And so this is something the user need to take in account. That if the infrastructure or the workflow is very complex, probably at the end the latency will be too high. And so once again, I think user need to do a real test before a production and perform a real test to understand the feasibility of a project.
Great, thank you for that. Dan, I have a question for you, and then we're going to wrap things up. If I have a Birddog feed from a camera to a TriCaster, and it has a delay in the feed on the SDI input, how do I sync that?
So that's an interesting question. One of the unique features of what we do with our Birddog devices is the way we encode that NDI in the first place. We've got our own engine. I mentioned when I was talking earlier about Silicon 2. In the silicon that we produce, the actual we take our video, we're actually syncing to the original source. So if you can imagine a frame of videos coming in, it gets drawn like you're reading a book. And after the first 16 lines of that book, we're already starting to make that into NDI. The fundamental thing with that is we're syncing to the source that's coming in, because we're running at the speed of that source. So if you've got an SDI signal that's coming in, we will end up locking to that signal and sending the NDI at that same speed. So that means when you get it to the other end, you can offset that in exactly the same way as you would with an SDI source, where you can just bump it across. So we're effectively transparent in the way that synchronization can change.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for all your answers. Participating in today's event. If we didn't get to answer your questions today, please type them in the chat and we'll try and get you any other answers shortly. Right after this, we'll be showing the Birddog case study for the Consensus 2002 event, so please be sure to watch to the end. All that remains for me is to thank you all very much for participating in the webinar. Thank you, gents, for being such great sports, and apologies again for all the technical difficulties that we had during the webinar. Please go to ndi.tv for all the latest news and NDI updates, and of course, download the NDI tools for free. See you next time, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
I'm Josh Castellano with ATX Event Systems, project manager, video engineer, Village Video, some call me.
Alexander Ballard, and I am an audio, video, and virtual engineer and project manager for ATX Event Systems.
My name is Anthony McCoy. I'm a project manager with ATX Event Systems. We're here in downtown Austin at Consensus 2022, and we are providing a whole infrastructure via Birddog Cloud across 7 venues.
So the event Consensus is the largest cryptocurrency conference currently in the world. It is a 7-venue conference in Austin, Texas.
For our scope, we had to deal with like coming in on a bunch of pre-installed audio video setups and adding in our aspects from a live stream.
We have, I believe, 33 cameras. Yeah, about 33 cameras in total all across with the city of Austin. We work with them with their fiber infrastructure underground, as well as with Wi-Fi Joe and Company to get a point-to-point access to different parts of Austin to ensure we're all on the same network. It's pretty incredible to see all 30-something cameras pop up.
I'm Joe Vallarta, founder of Wi-Fi Joe. I'm a network engineer and I specialize in network deployments for events.
Hi, I'm Ralph Mullen. I am the network architect for Wi-Fi Joe.
Yeah, about a month ago, ATX approached me to build a network for them at the Austin Convention Center. We solved all of the venues that we had. We're across 7 venues around Austin. We are at the Hilton Austin, we're at the Fairmount Austin, Copper Tank, Sunset Room. We're at an IHOP parking lot that was basically turned into a basketball court with a tent. And then we're at Belmont and the ACC, so we're at 7 venues. Some of the technology that we built was, especially in Austin, downtown Austin, there's not really good infrastructure here because the buildings are just so old. So what we've done is we're delivering internet to these venues with microwave point-to-point.
Another challenge we had with this whole event was that the load-in window was fairly small, so it was 27 hours where everybody needed to move in. There was another conference before. So what was really helpful is with the Birddog cameras, all we had to do is run one cable and it does power, it does remote control, PTZ control, and audio and video. So that just logistically and how many cables and how many boxes we had to move, that was advantageous.
So as far as the production for Consensus goes, there are 4 days and almost 24 hours of pretty much non-stop programming taking place at all 7 of these venues, talking about cryptocurrency, NFT, Web3, and overall how decentralized the world is becoming in the digital world, which is very relevant to this conversation because our attack at the workflow end with the video broadcast was extremely lateral and decentralized, leaving cameras all over the venue, all over Austin, Texas, but centralizing our operators and technicians in a very different place.
Well, Birddog Cloud is fantastic. The fact that you can just ping the server and not have to go through a lot of networking hoo-ha makes it quite user-friendly, which is super helpful, as well as Birddog Cam Control, just to easily, natively, without a controller even, just right there on a laptop, be able to adjust iris and input gain and different things with the camera right there within the GUI is super helpful.
It honestly was very impressive because it went outside of just here. And we were able to connect our Birddogs in like all of the other locations using all of their infrastructure. And even here at the convention center, I could pull in like a very clean and like gorgeous feed from our Birddogs from like Copper Tank a mile away. And so it really was just like the entire bones of the system.
When we first entered the conversation with this event, we knew that we needed a tool that would enable us to be as flexible as possible, be everywhere and anywhere at any time. So we figured Birddog would be a perfect product, a perfect tool, perfect manufacturer for this, especially in using the Birddog Cloud Connect product. We're able to give our clients a zero latency feed very quickly if they need it. If they need to see the main stage at the Austin Convention Center or what's happening at Sport Court, we can give them those feeds using Birddog's technology extremely quickly.
We've been using Birddogs quite a bit for the past 2 years about, and they've become sort of like an integral piece of most of our shows. They are quick and easy, and they're small footprint especially. We're using total of 33 P400s, and those cameras have very they look so crisp on stage. They respond very well, they're reliable, and we've put them in some pretty rough areas, whether they've been outside, and we're here in Texas and it's about 105 degrees outside. We're not in beautiful LA where it's 75 all year. And so we definitely are pushing the hardware to the limits to stand the test of the elements outside. So yes, just the fact that the Birddogs are on that same sort of unconventional, trying to push the boundaries, was what exactly made them fit for this system, for this setup. There's just so many things to juggle at once when doing an event of this scale, that to have the reliability of Birddog Cloud was just really one less thing to have to worry about. After about a year of me messing with them and getting hands-on experience, I'm definitely a fan.